She only asked for expired bread to feed her daughter. But when a billionaire at the corner table overheard her trembling voice, his heart and his past shattered open. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another emotional story that touches the heart. Bakery was small but busy, filled with laughter, coffee steam, and the rustle of paper bags. Behind the counter stood a young clerk with flour on his apron, chatting with a customer about pumpkin muffins. Maya waited patiently, pretending to browse. Her shoes were worn out, the soles peeling, and her jacket was 2 winters old. She held a few crumpled bills, less than $3, and a handful of coins. Ella tugged at her sleeve. "Mommy, I'm hungry." "I know." "Sweetheart," Maya whispered, swallowing hard. When the last customer left, Maya finally stepped forward. Her heart pounded so hard she thought the clerk could hear it. "Excuse me," she said softly, her voice trembling. Do you have any expired bread?" The young man blinked. "I'm sorry." "Expired bread," she repeated, barely audible. "Or anything old you can't sell anymore. My daughter and we can pay a little if it's okay." For a moment, the bakery fell silent. Even the coffee machine seemed to pause. At the far end of the room, a man in a charcoal coat looked up from his coffee. He had sharp eyes, silver streaks in his beard, and a presence that made people step aside without knowing why. He'd been reading financial reports on his tablet, but now he couldn't take his eyes off the woman speaking. The clerk stammered, embarrassed. We usually throw those out, but maybe I can check in the back." "Thank you," Maya whispered. Ella leaned against her leg, staring at the glass display filled with pastries she couldn't have. Croissants, bagels, sweet rolls. Her small stomach growled audibly. The man at the corner, Richard Hale, put his cup down slowly. He was the founder and CEO of Hale Enterprises, one of Chicago's most powerful real estate firms. To everyone else, he was a billionaire, a titan, a man who could buy anything he wanted. But as he watched the little girl lick her lips and lower her head, something inside him cracked. Because once, decades ago, he'd been that child, the one too proud to beg, yet too hungry to smile. The clerk returned with a small brown paper bag. "Here," he said awkwardly. "These rolls are from yesterday. They're still good, but we can't sell them anymore." Maya's eyes watered. "Thank you. Really?" She fumbled with her coins, trying to pay. "No, it's fine," the clerk said gently. "Take it." But Maya shook her head, sliding the coins across the counter. "Please, I can't take it for free." Richard's chest tightened as he listened. The pride in her voice, soft but steady, hit something deep. Ella's face lit up when Maya handed her the bag. She tore it open and giggled at the sight of the bread. "Mommy, they look so yummy." Maya smiled, tears welling up as she watched her daughter nibble the crust. "Eat slowly, sweetheart." Richard Hale stood, adjusting his coat. Something about the scene, the mother's trembling smile, the way she refused pity, made him feel small. For years, he'd been surrounded by luxury, yet nothing had touched him like this quiet moment in a corner bakery. He reached the counter, pretending to order. "Coffee, black," he said. His tone was deep, controlled, the voice of a man used to being obeyed. But his eyes followed the woman as she walked toward the door, hand in hand with her child. Outside, the wind was sharp. Maya pulled her daughter's hood up and whispered, "Hold on tight, baby." Richard's driver, waiting outside in a sleek black Mercedes, watched curiously as his boss stared after them. "Something wrong, sir?" the driver asked. Richard didn't answer. He stepped closer to the window, watching Maya cross the street, her daughter skipping beside her with a paper bag of bread. Her back was straight, her step slow but sure, the walk of someone who had nothing left to lose, but refused to bow. He murmured, almost to himself, "Expired bread, sir," the driver repeated. Richard's gaze lingered on the small figures disappearing around the corner. "Just drive." As the car rolled through the wet streets, Richard couldn't shake the sound of her voice, soft, desperate and strong all at once. It replayed in his mind like a haunting echo. "Do you have any expired bread for my daughter?" He leaned back in his seat, but there was no peace. For the first time in years, his chest ached in a way no luxury could soothe. That night, in his penthouse overlooking the city skyline, Richard poured himself a drink and sat by the window. The lights of Chicago glittered below, the world he ruled. Yet, amid all the brightness, he felt something dark inside, an emptiness money could never fill. He picked up his phone, scrolling through endless numbers, assistants, investors, partners, but not a single person he could truly call. Then his eyes fell on the reflection of his own face in the glass. For the first time, he looked. "Tired." He whispered into the quiet room. Who was she? And though he didn't know it yet, the answer would change his life forever. Richard Hale hadn't slept a full night since that morning in the bakery. His mind replayed the moment like a loop, the frail voice of the mother, the tiny hand of the child gripping a paper bag, the sound of gratitude so sincere it hurt to remember. He had built Hale Enterprises from nothing. Every skyscraper, every investment, every mansion he owned was proof of his discipline, his refusal to be weak. But that night, sitting in his glass penthouse overlooking Chicago, he felt poorer than he ever had as a child. It wasn't guilt. Not exactly. It was recognition. He had once stood barefoot outside a bakery too. His mother, a house cleaner, had whispered the same words Maya Brooks had spoken. "Do you have any bread from yesterday?" He'd never forgotten the look on her face, dignity fighting shame. Now, decades later, a stranger's voice had reopened the wound. The next morning, Richard called his assistant. "Nora, find me the name of the owner of Sweet Crumbs Bakery," he ordered curtly. Nora hesitated on the other end. "Sir, may I ask why?" "No," he said flatly. "Just do it." By noon, he had the file on his desk, bakery permits, vendor details, and a few security images from the shop. And there, in a blurred corner of one photo, was her. Maya Brooks. Richard stared at her name like it meant something sacred. He leaned back, exhaling slowly. Maya, her address, listed from a part-time job application, was on the south side, Englewood, a neighborhood most people in his circle only mentioned when making donations or talking crime statistics. Richard closed his laptop. "Cancel my meetings." "But, sir, cancel everything." The black Mercedes eased into the narrow street 2 hours later. Boarded houses, graffiti, and broken sidewalks framed the path. Children played soccer with a plastic bottle. Richard had traded tailored suits for a simple gray coat, hoping not to draw attention. At the far end of the block, he saw her, the woman from the bakery, standing outside a rundown apartment complex, holding her daughter's hand. Ella was wearing the same pink hoodie, but it looked even smaller now, stretched and faded. Richard's throat tightened. Maya smiled weakly at another tenant passing by, adjusting the grocery bag in her arm. She was trying to look fine. Richard stayed in the car, watching quietly. Ella tugged her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, can I have milk today?" Maya hesitated before answering. "We'll see what's on sale, sweetheart." Those words, "we'll see what's on sale," landed like a punch. Richard turned away, blinking hard. He had seen poverty before, but not like this. Not through eyes that saw himself in it. Later that evening, back in his office, he stood by the window again, the skyline stretching. Below like a glittering lie. He poured a glass of scotch and stared at his reflection. He could buy anything, but he couldn't buy the look in that woman's eyes, the quiet war between pride and hunger. He wanted to help her, but how? Money would insult her dignity. Charity would humiliate her. Then he remembered something. She had refused free bread. She needed to earn what she took. That was the kind of person he wanted working for him. Richard picked up the phone and dialed Nora again. "I need a personal housekeeper," he said. "Sir, you already have 3. Not like this one." He interrupted. "Find Maya Brooks. Offer her a position. Tell her the job includes housing, medical insurance, and a scholarship for her daughter. Nora paused. Should I mention your name? Richard looked out at the dark city, the lights reflecting like ghosts. No, don't tell her who it's for. Not yet. The next morning, Maya was standing in line at a community shelter when her old phone buzzed with an unknown number. Hello? She said nervously. Good morning, ma'am. This is Nora from Hale Residential Services. We received your reference from a bakery you recently visited. A client is interested in hiring you as a full-time housekeeper. Maya blinked in disbelief. Me? Yes, ma'am. It's a live-in position. You'll have accommodation and benefits for your child. The employer prefers discretion, but he was impressed by your humility. Maya's heart raced. Is this a prank? No, ma'am. We can send a car for you tomorrow morning if you're interested. Tears filled her eyes. She looked down at Ella, who was drawing on the sidewalk with a broken crayon. Yes, she whispered. Yes, please. The next day, a black car arrived at their crumbling apartment complex. Neighbors peeked from windows, whispering as Maya and Ella climbed in. The driver smiled politely. You'll like it there, ma'am. It's quiet, clean, and safe. Ella's little face pressed against the window as the city rolled past. Mommy, is this a dream? Maya brushed her cheek. Maybe, baby, maybe it's a miracle. They arrived at the gates of an enormous estate on the outskirts of Chicago. The mansion stood against the sky like something out of a storybook. Ivy walls, marble steps, and fountains that glittered in the afternoon light. Maya's jaw dropped. This can't be right. It is, the driver said, opening her door. Welcome to Hale Manor. Her heart raced. Hale? Yes, the driver smiled. Your employer will meet you soon. Maya clutched Ella's hand as they stepped inside. The air smelled of lavender and polished oak. Ella gasped. Mommy, look, it's like a castle. Maya nodded, whispering under her breath, don't touch anything, okay? From the grand staircase above, Richard Hale watched silently as they entered. He saw the wonder in Ella's eyes, the disbelief in Maya's, and something stirred in him, something that had been buried for far too long. He turned to Nora, who stood beside him. She doesn't know it's me yet? No, sir. Good, he said softly, his gaze never leaving them. Let's keep it that way. For now. Maya had clean houses before, small ones, crowded ones, even those that barely held together. But this was another world. The marble floors gleamed like mirrors. Chandeliers glittered above like constellations. Every window framed a perfect view of the city skyline. The butler, an older man named Harris, showed her around. You'll be in charge of the East Wing, he said politely. Guest suites, the main library, and the garden atrium. We keep things spotless here. Maya nodded nervously, clutching Ella's tiny hand. Yes, sir. We'll do our best. You'll have your own quarters upstairs, Harris added. Dinner is served at 7. Breakfast at 7:30 sharp. Ella's eyes widened as she looked up at the staircase that spiraled into the high ceiling. Mommy, do people live here? Maya smiled faintly. I guess so, sweetheart. But inside, she was trembling. The place was so big it made her feel invisible. As they settled into a small but elegant servant room on the upper floor. Maya helped Ella unpack her meager belongings. To dresses, a picture of her late husband, and a worn stuffed bunny. Mommy, do you think the man who lives here is nice? Ella asked. Maya hesitated, folding her daughter's blanket. I hope so. Baby, we just have to be grateful. That night, as the staff gathered for dinner in the kitchen, the atmosphere was light and chatty. Cooks swapped jokes, cleaners gossiped quietly, and Harris gave instructions for the next morning. Maya sat quietly at the end of the table, listening. She didn't want to draw attention. One of the maids, a cheerful woman named Claire, leaned closer. You're the new one, right? The one with the little girl. Maya nodded. Yes, that's us. Claire smiled warmly. You're lucky. The boss here is generous, even if he keeps to himself. We hardly ever see him. He's private. Maya tilted her head. Private? Claire chuckled. You'll see what I mean. He lives upstairs, works from home sometimes. He doesn't talk to staff much, but he treats everyone fairly. Never yells. Pays on time. And he gives Christmas bonuses, real ones. Maya smiled politely, but something about the way Claire described him made her curious. A man that rich, that powerful. Why would he stay hidden? Upstairs, Richard Hale watched from his study as Maya and her daughter ate dinner with the staff. The security camera streamed quietly on his monitor, part of the estate safety system. He told himself he wasn't spying. He was just making sure they were comfortable. He zoomed in slightly, watching Ella laugh at something Claire said. The sound, even through the faint audio feed, made him smile without realizing it. There was light in that child. He turned the feed off, but the image stayed in his mind. He remembered his own mother's laugh, soft and tired, yet full of love. For a moment, he let himself feel something he hadn't in years. Peace. Then he pushed it away. Don't get attached, he muttered. You're just helping them get back on their feet. But deep down, he knew it wasn't true. Days turned into weeks. Maya worked tirelessly, polishing floors, arranging books, trimming roses in the garden atrium. She was quiet, diligent, and kind to everyone. Ella spent her mornings in the small staff nursery, drawing and reading. The housekeeper had grown fond of her quickly, calling her the sunshine of Hale Manor. One afternoon, while Maya was scrubbing the marble foyer, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned and froze. There he was. A tall man in a dark gray suit stood near the staircase, his silver hair catching the light. His eyes, sharp yet warm, rested on her. She didn't recognize him, of course. She'd only seen the back of his head in that bakery weeks ago. But he recognized her instantly. Good afternoon, Richard said, his tone calm. Maya straightened quickly. Good afternoon, sir. I'm sorry, I didn't see you coming. He smiled faintly. You must be Miss Brooks. Yes, sir, she replied, bowing her head slightly. Thank you for the opportunity. He studied her for a moment, the way she kept her posture straight despite exhaustion, the quiet strength in her eyes. You've been doing excellent work, he said softly. Thank you, sir. He hesitated, then added, your daughter, she's adjusting well? Yes, Maya said, her voice softening. She loves the garden. She's never had a place like this before. Something flickered across his face, pride mixed with guilt. He nodded. That's good. If you need anything, tell Harris. And just like that, he walked away, leaving Maya staring after him, wondering why the air suddenly felt heavier. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. The image of her employer, tall, composed, mysterious, lingered in her mind. There was something strange about him, something unreadable. Why did he look at her like he knew her? She turned to glance at Ella sleeping peacefully beside her. Maybe I'm just imagining things, she whispered. But she wasn't. Because upstairs, in his study, Richard was staring out the window, replaying their brief conversation over and over again. He'd spent years surrounded by people who spoke to him only because of his name, his power, or his wealth. But when Maya said thank you, it was real. No performance, no flattery, just sincerity. He poured himself a glass of water and sat down, staring at the city lights again. He whispered under his breath, I can't let her find out who I am. Not yet. The next morning, Ella was running through the garden when she bumped into Richard near the fountain. She froze, clutching her doll. Oh, I'm sorry, sir. Richard smiled kindly. It's all right, young lady. You live here? She asked innocently. He chuckled. I suppose I do. She studied him curiously, then whispered, You have a nice house. Mommy says rich people aren't always nice, but you seem nice. Richard laughed softly, his heart melting. Your mommy sounds very wise. She is, Ella said proudly. She says nice people share bread. His breath caught. The words hit him like lightning. He knelt down to her level. She said that? Ella nodded happily. Mommy says even when we don't have much, we can still share. Richard smiled faintly, blinking away emotion. Your mommy's right. And as he watched her run off again, he whispered to himself, she's more right than she knows. The following week brought subtle changes to the rhythm of Hale Manor. Maya noticed how the staff moved with quiet urgency whenever Mr. Hale's footsteps echoed down the hall. Even though he rarely spoke, his presence carried gravity, like a storm that never raised its voice, but still demanded attention. Yet, strangely, around her and Ella, he seemed softer. He would greet them with a polite smile, sometimes stop in the garden to ask Ella about her drawings, or compliment Maya's flower arrangements without pretense. The other maids whispered about it. Claire nudged Maya one afternoon as they polished the stair rails. You've caught the boss's eye, she teased, grinning. Maya flushed instantly. Don't say that. He's just kind. That's all. Claire shrugged. Kind? Maybe. But I've been here for years, and I've never seen him smile as much as he does when your daughter's round. Maya laughed nervously, brushing the thought away. He's just a good man. But that night, as she tucked Ella into bed, she couldn't stop wondering why a billionaire would be interested into nobodies from the South Side. Meanwhile, in his study upstairs, Richard sat in silence before a flickering fireplace. He held an old photograph, his mother, smiling faintly in a faded apron, standing in front of a small bakery. He hadn't looked at that picture in years, but now everything about Maya reminded him of her, the strength, the humility, the quiet endurance. He whispered, You'd like her, Mom. Nora, his assistant, knocked gently on the door. Sir, the charity board meeting is tomorrow at 9. Shall I confirm attendance? He shook his head. Cancel it. Have them send reports instead. Sir, this is the third meeting you've skipped. I said cancel it. He said, his tone sharp but weary. Nora nodded slowly. She had worked for him long enough to recognize that tone, one of conflict, not anger. Understood, sir. As she turned to leave, she hesitated. Sir, may I say something? Richard glanced up. Go ahead. She reminds you of someone, doesn't she? Nora said softly. The woman from the bakery. Richard's jaw tightened. That's none of your concern. Nora smiled faintly. Of course, sir. But whatever you're doing, helping her, watching over her, it's changing you. And for the first time in a long time. It's a good change. When she left, Richard sighed and whispered, It doesn't feel like a good change. It feels like losing control. The next morning, Maya was cleaning the study when her duster brushed against a framed newspaper clipping on the desk. She froze when she saw the headline. Richard Hale, the billionaire who built an empire from nothing. Beneath it was a photo of the same man she saw walking through the halls every morning. Same gray hair, same calm eyes. Her hand trembled slightly. He's the Richard Hale. She'd heard the name before, whispered in bakeries and markets, attached to words like powerful, untouchable, ruthless. Why would a man like that hire her? And why secretly? The questions circled in her mind as she backed away from the desk, heart pounding. Mommy! Ella's voice rang from the hall. Mr. Hale said we can see the horses. Maya spun around. He what? Before she could process it, Richard appeared at the doorway, holding Ella's hand. She asked about the stables. He explained, smiling faintly. I thought she might enjoy a short visit. Maya forced a polite smile. Oh, that's very kind, sir. But we wouldn't want to impose. It's no imposition, Richard said gently. Come, the horses don't get many visitors. Maya hesitated, then followed them through the garden path toward the large white stable at the back of the estate. Inside, the smell of hay and leather filled the air. Ella squealed with delight at the sight of the horses. They're so big. She cried. Mommy, look. Maya laughed, a sound that made Richard's chest tighten unexpectedly. Careful, sweetheart. Don't startle them. He watched them with quiet admiration, his gaze softening every time Maya smiled. But then Ella said something that froze him. Mommy, do you think they eat expired bread too? Maya's face went pale. Ella, SHH. Richard's breath caught. His heart slammed against his ribs. Maya turned to him, flustered. I'm so sorry, sir. She doesn't understand. Richard stepped forward, his voice quiet. No, don't apologize. He crouched to Ella's level. Why did you ask that, little one? Ella shrugged. Because Mommy says sometimes even old things can still make people happy. He looked up at Maya. Their eyes met, and for a second, she saw something deep there. Something familiar. He whispered, she's wise. Just like her mother. Maya's breath hitched. Sir, Richard stood, clearing his throat. You both should eat before dinner gets cold. Harris will show you back. As they walked away, Maya's mind swirled with confusion. Why had he looked at her that way? Why did her daughter's innocent questions seem to shake him? That night, as Ella slept, Maya sat by the window of their small room, staring out at the garden bathed in moonlight. She whispered to herself, he heard us that day, didn't he? It all made sense now, the sudden job offer, the kindness, the watchful glances. He'd been there, in the bakery. She covered her mouth, her heart pounding. Oh my God! Tears welled in her eyes, not from fear, but from something deeper. Gratitude tangled with pride, shame mixed with awe. She wanted to thank him, to tell him how much it meant that he'd seen her. But how could she, without feeling small? So instead, she whispered a prayer. God bless him, whoever he is when no one's looking. Upstairs, Richard stood on his balcony, watching the same moonlit garden. He whispered into the wind, as if she could hear him through the night. You don't owe me thanks, Maya. You owe yourself a second chance. But what neither of them knew was that the truth between them was no longer hidden, because Claire, the maid who liked to gossip, had overheard Maya muttering his name earlier. And by morning, the story of who she really was to the boss would begin spreading through the house like wildfire. And soon, it wouldn't just be whispered behind her back. It would reach her ears. And when it did, everything would change. Morning sunlight poured through the tall windows of Hale Manor, lighting the grand hall like a cathedral. But beneath that golden calm, whispers were spreading, quiet, sharp, unstoppable. Did you hear? One maid murmured to another by the laundry room. They say Mr. Hale found her. Found who? The new maid, Maya Brooks, the one with the daughter. He met her in some bakery. She was begging for food. A gasp. No. Yes, they say she asked for expired bread, and he overheard her. That's why he hired her. Are you serious? Would I make up something like that? By noon, nearly everyone in the house had heard the story. By 2, they'd all decided what it meant. Some pitied her, some admired her, and a few, jealous, bitter souls, laughed quietly behind her back. Maya noticed the shift immediately. The usual warmth in the staff room was gone, replaced by uneasy smiles and sit-along glances. Claire, who used to chat endlessly, now spoke in clipped sentences. The cook who once offered her extra rolls for Ella suddenly stopped. At first, Maya thought she was imagining it, but when she entered the kitchen that afternoon, she heard it, her name, whispered like an accusation. Charity Case. Lucky he took pity on her. The laughter that followed felt like knives. She froze, her face flushing with shame. The room went silent as they noticed her standing there. Claire looked up, startled. Maya. But Maya just smiled faintly, pretending she hadn't heard. Could I get the mop, please? She took it and walked out quietly, her heart breaking with every step. Upstairs, Richard was in a meeting when Harris entered the study, his face tight with discomfort. Sir, there's something happening among the staff, Harris said carefully. Richard glanced up. What kind of something? Gossip, sir. About Ms. Brooks. Richard's expression hardened instantly. What gossip? Harris hesitated, lowering his voice. They say you found her in a bakery, that she was poor, desperate, and that's why she's here. The billionaire's jaw tightened. Who told them? I'm not certain, sir, but it's spreading fast. Ms. Brooks heard it too. Richard exhaled slowly, setting his pen down. His chest felt heavy, not from anger, but guilt. He had wanted to help her quietly, to protect her dignity. Now that dignity was being trampled because of him. He rose abruptly. Where is she? In the atrium, sir. Cleaning the glass. The garden atrium was filled with the soft scent of lavender and sunlight streaming through the ceiling glass. Maya stood near the corner, scrubbing quietly. Tears streaking her cheeks, she thought no one saw. But Richard saw. He stood there for a long time, just watching her, the same way he'd watched her in the bakery that morning, the same way he had promised himself he wouldn't again. Then he spoke. Miss Brooks. She froze, turning sharply, wiping at her eyes. Sir, I didn't hear you comin'. He stepped closer. I heard about the rumors. She forced a smile, her voice trembling. It's fine, sir. I've dealt with worse. It's not fine, he said quietly. You deserve respect in this house. Respect? She gave a bitter laugh. Sir, please. You gave me a job, a home, food for my daughter. I'm grateful. But I know how people see me now. They think I'm some charity project. His eyes softened. That's not what this is. Then what is it? She demanded softly. Why me? Why my daughter? Why hire a stranger you met once? I don't understand. Mr. Hale, the question hung in the air like thunder. He took a step closer, voice low. Because I was you once. Maya blinked, stunned. When I was a boy, Richard continued, his tone steady, my mother worked 3 jobs to feed me. We begged for bread once, expired, stale, unwanted, and someone gave it to us. He looked at her, not as a boss, but as a man stripped bare. When I heard your voice that day in the bakery, it was like hearing hers again. I couldn't walk away. I wouldn't. Maya's lip trembled. You were there. He nodded slowly. Yes, I heard every word. Tears filled her eyes, and she turned away. I don't know whether to thank you or hate you right now. You don't know me either, he said softly. I didn't help you to make you feel small. I did it because I knew what it was to be unseen. For a long moment, silence filled the atrium. Only the soft rustle of leaves and Ella's distant laughter from outside broke it. Finally, Maya whispered, You shouldn't have kept it from me. I know, Richard said, his voice breaking for the first time. I was afraid that if you knew, you'd leave. She turned to him, eyes glistening. And if I did? He smiled faintly. Then I'd still be grateful. Because for the first time in years, helping someone made me feel human again. Maya looked away, unable to speak. The next day, the staff's whispers grew even louder. But Maya no longer hid. When Claire tried to apologize, she simply smiled and said, You don't need to be sorry. I may have come here poor, but my worth was never measured in money. That quiet confidence silenced them more effectively than anger ever could. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Maya found a small envelope outside her door. Inside was a handwritten note. Pride and pain are born from the same place, the heart. You have both, and you wear them beautifully. Thank you for letting me help, even if you never needed it. R.H. Maya pressed the note to her chest, tears slipping down her cheeks. For the first time in years, they weren't tears of shame. Down the hall, Richard stood at his study window again, watching the lights flicker across the city. He knew what he felt for her now wasn't just pity. It was admiration, maybe even something deeper. But he also knew she needed time to forgive him, time to see him not as a billionaire, but as a man who'd once been hungry and time would give them both something neither had before. Hope. The morning air was bright and cold, brushing gently against the windows of the Hale estate. The last traces of autumn clung to the trees as the first hints of winter kissed the ground. Maya woke up before dawn, as always, but this morning felt different. There was peace inside her chest, fragile, quiet peace, the kind that comes after a storm finally ends. Ella was still asleep, curled beneath the thick duvet Mr. Hale had insisted on getting her. Maya brushed her little girl's hair away from her forehead and smiled. You're safe now, she whispered. You'll never go hungry again. Downstairs, the smell of roasted coffee and cinnamon filled the kitchen. Maya had baked muffins for the household, humming softly to herself. The other staff trickled in one by one. No more whispers, No more stares. The gossip had died, replaced by something new. Respect. Even Claire, once distant, greeted her warmly. Morning, Maya. Those muffins smell amazing. Maya smiled. They're Ella's favorite. She's a lucky kid. She's my reason for everything. Maya replied. At 9 o'clock, Harris approached her in the hall. Mr. Hale would like to see you in the garden, he said. With the faintest knowing smile, Maya nodded, smoothing her apron and following the path through the French doors. The garden was glowing under the morning sun, dew sparkling on every leaf. Richard Hale stood by the old oak tree, hands in his pockets, eyes on the horizon. He turned as he heard her footsteps. Good morning, he said softly. Good morning, sir. I told you to call me Richard. He teased gently. She hesitated, then smiled. Good morning, Richard. He nodded approvingly. Much better. There was a comfortable pause between them. Birds chirped nearby, and the air carried the scent of roses from the greenhouse. Maya, he began carefully, there's something I need to tell you. Something I've decided. Her heart fluttered nervously. All right, he gestured to the bench. Please, sit. They both sat, the wood creaking slightly beneath them. I've been thinking, Richard said slowly, about everything that happened. The bakery, the rumors, the way people looked at you. She looked down. I'm used to being looked at that way. You shouldn't be, he said firmly. Not anymore. His voice softened. You once asked me why I helped you. You were right to ask. But it wasn't just charity or guilt. Maya turned toward him, her eyes uncertain. Richard continued, his tone filled with emotion he could no longer hide. You reminded me that life isn't measured in wealth. It's measured in moments, the ones we fight for, and the people who make them matter. He paused, meeting her gaze. I've spent my whole life building walls of money around myself, thinking they'd keep the pain out. But then I met you, and your daughter. And for the first time, I wanted to live outside those walls. Maya's breath caught. Richard, I know I've crossed lines before, he said quickly. I know I hurt your pride, even when I was trying to help. But I want to make things right, for both of you. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small folded paper. Maya frowned slightly. What's that? He handed it to her. Read it. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded it. It was a letter, official, printed on Hale Industries letterhead. Employment transfer notice, effective immediately. Maya Brooks is hereby appointed head of residential staff at Hale Manor, with full benefits and housing included. She gasped, looking up at him. Richard, I can't accept this. You can, he interrupted softly. And you will, because you've earned it. You've worked harder than anyone here. And I trust you. Tears welled in her eyes. You don't have to do this for me, he smiled faintly. Maybe I'm doing it for myself. Maya laughed through her tears. You're impossible. Persistent, he corrected gently. That night, Ella came running into the hall with a drawing clutched in her small hands. Mr. Hale! Mr. Hale! She called, her bright voice echoing through the marble corridor. Richard knelt to her level, smiling. Hey, sunshine! What's this? It's you and Mommy, she said proudly, holding up a crayon drawing of 3 stick figures. A man, a woman, and a little girl standing between them under a rainbow. Above them, in childish handwriting, were the words, Our family. Maya froze where she stood, her breath catching in her throat. Richard looked at the picture for a long moment, his eyes softening. It's beautiful, he said finally. You're quite the artist. Ella grinned. Mommy says family means people who never let you go. He glanced up at Maya then, and for the first time, she didn't look away. The weeks passed quickly. Winter came, coating the city in quiet silver. The bakery where Maya had once begged now displayed a new sign in the window. Bread of Hope, sponsored by Hale Foundation. Every weekend, boxes of fresh food were delivered to families in need. And on the side of each box, written in delicate script, were the words Richard had once whispered to Maya. No one should have to beg for bread. Maya and Ella often helped with the deliveries. Sometimes, when they stopped by that same bakery, Maya would look toward the corner where it all began and smile. remembering the day that changed her life. One afternoon, after a long day of deliveries, Richard joined them at the bakery. He watched as Ella handed out pastries to children, giggling as sugar dusted her fingers. "She's thriving," he said quietly. Maya nodded. "She finally laughs without fear." Richard turned to her, his eyes warm. "And what about you, Maya? Do you laugh without fear now?" She smiled softly. "I'm learning." He chuckled. "Then maybe we can learn together." For a moment, the world stilled around them, the laughter of children fading into the background. The smell of fresh bread filling the air. It was the same corner where their paths had crossed. But this time, they weren't strangers. Maya reached out, touching his hand lightly. "Thank you, Richard, for hearing me that day, and for never forgetting." He looked at her hand resting on his, then up into her eyes. "Thank you for reminding me that wealth means nothing if it can't feed a hungry heart." And just like that, without grand gestures or extravagant words, something real, something right bloomed quietly between them. Later, as they walked out of the bakery with Ella skipping ahead, Richard whispered, almost to himself, "Do you have an expired bread for my daughter?" Maya smiled at the echo of those words, words that had once been a plea, now turned into a promise. She turned to him and said gently, "No, but I have a fresh start." And as they walked into the golden glow of evening, hand in hand, it was clear this was no longer a story of hunger or pity. It was a story of grace, redemption, and love reborn in the most unexpected place. If this story moved you, please like, comment, and subscribe for more life-changing stories every week. Your support keeps these stories alive.